Chapter 361 Sealed Memories. In a wasteland, somewhere in the Moonlight Empire, Maximus silently looked at Liam, not resisting the formation array. What do you want?" he asked. He thought Liam was the same as Maxine, wanting to do something with him. Don't you miss us?" Liam frowned at his unusual father. Miss? Why would I miss you? It's only been 1,000 years. How could he miss them in such a short period of time? It seems that something is really wrong with you." Liam frowned. He had read in the past that those who mastered the amalgamation of will have some shift in their personalities. Using the will of people could also taint you with them. His father should have lost control while in seclusion. Nothing is wrong with me." Maximus shook his head. Now, if you'll excuse me." Wait. What? I'll take you to see others," Liam said coldly. If you can." Maximus didn't care and mobilized his domain to teleport out. Suddenly, he noticed something wrong with his domain. However, before he had time to investigate, a foot came to his face. Frowning, Maximus easily blocked the attack. Snap. How so? Liam muttered with shock. Although it was not his all-out power, seeing his father easily block he frowned. Wanting to test his strength, Liam continued to attack. However, to his surprise, his father was like a bottomless abyss. No matter what attack he threw, it would vanish like a puff. Mobilizing the essence of law and his special physique, he finally saw a result. His father, who had been blocking his attacks until now, was knocked back. Is that it? Liam smiled excitedly. Since he was a child, Liam dreamed of defeating his father. However, time and time again, his father proved that he was invincible. Seeing him being knocked back helplessly, Liam continued to attack. He even forgot his intentions. Meanwhile, Maximus was having a hard time. Although he could parry Liam's attacks, he couldn't counter or even immobilize Liam. He either had to dodge or block them. Fortunately, he had studied the essence of law of the Ethereum realm to proficiency. Liam didn't even have a proficient mastery, thus the harm he received was limited. Besides being a little disgraced, there was not even sweat on his face. After a few minutes of having fun beating his father, Liam calmed down and suddenly noticed his father not using the amalgamation of will. Why aren't you using the amalgamation of will, father? This was his father's trump card. With it, fighting with an apex sovereign like him should be no problem. Yet now, seeing he couldn't even fight back, Liam's doubt grew deeper. Did his father really lose control with the amalgamation of will? The amalgamation of will? Maximus cast a doubtful glance. Retrieving the information about the amalgamation of will, he was stunned. My memories are blocked? Besides a few pieces of information about the amalgamation of will, he couldn't find anything about it, much less use it. Seeing Liam's expression, he should be able to use it. Yet now, no matter how deeply he searched, there was no such thing in his memories. Suddenly, various doubts began to emerge in his mind. He had been wondering where the energy the system used for him to comprehend knowledge. Now it should be this amalgamation of will. Furthermore, he just noticed his domain was different. It was infinitely expanding like the origin of the world. In his domain, he was omnipotent and omniscient. Yet before seeing it, he had no memories of how he mastered it. Deeply reviewing the life experience of Maximus Shadowcrest, he was shocked to find a few missing nodes. Some time was skipped or didn't make sense at all, as if it was manipulated. Am I not me anymore? He frowned. Although he was rational, something should have changed within him. Otherwise, there would be no phenomenon of his memory being tampered with. Meanwhile, Liam, seeing his father questioning his existence, heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that his father still had some self-control. Perhaps he only needed some stimulation and some time to go back to normal. How about we return to the castle first, father? Mother Isabella should be back from the abyss. His mother Isabella had also reached Tier 9 and was stationed in the abyss, helping Lux manage their properties. As for his other mothers, brothers, and sisters, they were in seclusion. 1,000 years ago, they were notified by their father that something went wrong and he would need to go into seclusion for an indefinite amount of time. Initially, they thought it was nothing. After all, their father had always been omnipotent in their minds. However, as years, decades, and centuries passed, they nearly fell into despair thinking they would never see Maximus again. However, believing in him, they could only wait. Still, to numb themselves, they went into seclusion one after another. After coming back to his senses, Maximus agreed to Liam. The source of all his confusion should be his origin. It had been chaotic since he could remember. He noticed that as he interacted with these so-called family members, his origin began to calm down as if being soothed. His rational mind told him that the solution to his problem should be with them. In the imperial castle, after a few days of tumbling around and investigating his origin, he finally saw Isabella.
Her husband.
Isabella teared up, throwing herself to Maximus. Maximus initially wanted to be perfunctory, however, as he thought so, his origin seemed to want to explode, warning him to be careful. Following his instinct, he could only reluctantly hug Isabella back. Seeing this, Liam heaved a sigh of relief. He was worried that his father would continue his cold attitude toward his mother. Seeing his father's instinct was still there, a smile unknowingly appeared on his face. After having enough, Isabella turned to look deeply at her husband. Seeing his eyes, bottomless like an abyss, Isabella frowned. She seemed to see her husband drowning in the abyss beneath those very eyes. Touching his face, Isabella nearly teared up. Don't worry, I will cure you immediately," as she murmured. Hearing this, although Maximus didn't feel anything, he saw his origin greatly calm down. Soon the days continued to pass. While Maximus was investigating his lost memories, trying to fix his chaotic origin, Isabella was trying everything to cure him. Unfortunately, so far, no effect can be seen. Seeing that there was nothing he could do, Maximus continued to comprehend knowledge, albeit intermittently. Maxine was like a restless curse who kept disturbing him. After finding that he could condense more delicious food than she could buy outside, this little kid clung to him like a koala. Maximus needed to condense new food every day just to satisfy this little girl's appetite, wasting his time. On one of the days he was working to satisfy Maxine, a visitor came.
Uncle Lux.
"You're here," Maxine shouted excitedly. This was one of her favorite uncles. Besides being rich, her uncle also had a lot of delicious food. Little Maxine, how are you? Have you gotten a little fatter recently?" Lux smiled, picking up Maxine. No, this is just baby fat," Maxine said cutely. Hee, anyway, where's your welcome gift, uncle?" You greedy little girl, here," Lux said, taking out a packet of assorted food. Thank you, uncle," Maxine said, kissing Lux's cheek. Take me to your senile grandfather." Grandfather is not senile, he was more energetic and handsome than uncle, Maxine said with a pout. The one who gave her the most delicious food was the most beautiful, no matter what. Speaking of this, she couldn't help but remember her grandmother, Erica. When she was born a few years ago, her grandmother exited her seclusion and cooked her a banquet every day. Drooling, she couldn't help but lick her lips greedily. "You're thinking about food again," Lux muttered, pinching her cheek. Maxine screamed in embarrassment. Getting out of Lux's embrace, she dragged Lux to her grandfather. Seeing his father, Lux couldn't help but be emotional.
Father." Lux bowed. Maximus just nodded nonchalantly.
Father, I heard about your condition. Have you tried using the Myriad World Mall to see if there is a solution?"
Lux asked.
Before his father went into seclusion, he gave them a single copy of the Myriad World Mall, making them aware of its existence. As for the one who bounded the system, the chosen one was Lux. He was the best one of them when it came to managing money and making it grow. Having the Myriad World Mall was like giving a tiger its wings. This also propelled him to amass enormous wealth, pushing him to become an apex sovereign. Meanwhile, hearing another term that was not present in his memories, Maximus frowned. Myriad World Mall? Looking at his panel, he couldn't help but doubt if it was in complete form. Maximus Shadowcrest. Status.
System points.
Knowledge Mall. His system only functioned it to see his real-time status, use system points, and by seemingly infinite knowledge. As for the Myriad World Mall, he didn't even know its name. Just what did he do previously? Furthermore, why seal his memories? Chapter 362 Invincible Father. Seeing that his father didn't even remember about the Myriad World Mall, Lux frowned. "You then leave it to me, I'll see if there's something I could buy in it." Over the years, with Lux's manipulation, he was richer than he had ever been. In his account alone, there were hundreds of sextillions of dimensional coins in savings. Leveraging the Ethereum realm and the Abyss, earning a few sextillions every year was quite easy.
Maximus just nodded.
Dad, can you tell me about your condition?
It's my origin.
My very existence seems to be in chaos, Maximus said cooperatively.
Lux was surprised.
It seemed that even the memory of his father's ultimate cultivation method was missing. If it were not, his father could have easily solved this problem. Frowning, Lux browsed treasures that could affect the origin, somewhat or another. First, filter the Tier 10 treasures. Unfortunately, there were none like he expected. It seemed to be a rare treasure. Filtering through Tier 9 treasures, he found some that could affect the origin.
He found it.
Briefly reading the introduction, Lux bought a series of treasures for his father to try. Seeing the high-tier treasure carelessly thrown by Lux, Maximus was a little stunned. Although he didn't know the exact prices of these things, they were surely expensive. On the other hand, seeing his father's look, Lux raised his head proudly. Remembering the days when his father took out dazzling treasures that left him speechless, Lux felt unprecedented joy.
Now it's my turn to show off, he thought.
Even the sextillions of dimensional coins he spent just now felt worth it. Come try it quickly, Dad, Lux urged, trying to show off.
Oh.
Soon, days after days of trying, Maximus felt no difference in his origin. It can't be, Lux muttered with pain, thinking of several sextillions gone to waste. Maybe it's not enough. Lux gritted his teeth, wanting to buy more. You don't need to bother. It's ineffective. Maximus shook his head. He knew his condition better. If there was a slight effect, he would surely ask Lux to buy more.
Lux sighed in defeat.
Suddenly, he remembered Malgrin, the saint patron of his business. Being the strongest man alive, Malgrin should know some methods that could improve the condition of his father. Dad, let's go into the abyss. Maybe Uncle Malgrin can help. Maximus also nodded, understanding Lux's intention. According to his memories, Malgrin seemed to be unfathomable. It's not just about the ultimate physique that made him strong, but something more. In the Abyss Shadow Hunter stronghold, Maximus and Liam directly teleported. After reaching Tier 9, one could directly request the world's will service. Teleporting from one dimension to another was an easy task, much less to the Abyss, which was directly in front of the Ethereum realm. How is the stronghold, Dad? Lux asked smugly. After his father left, instead of regressing, the stronghold became more prosperous. Now the Shadow Hunter stronghold is much bigger than the Ethereum Citadel. Their stronghold had become one of the spearheads attacking through the purgatory layer of the Abyss. Hundreds of years ago, after they conquered the middle layer of the Abyss, the war was directed to the purgatory layer. However, due to the harsh climate and stronger enemies, the only thing that can survive in this layer is a moving stronghold. Thus, the Shadow Hunter stronghold became one of the pioneers leading the attack. In all times, there had to be at least 30 apex sovereigns stationed in this stronghold. It's not only that there are also hundreds of Tier 10 weapons mounted in the stronghold, making it a moving nuclear threat to the Abyss.
Not bad.
Seeing the stronghold different from his memories, Maximus was nonchalant. There was nothing that interested him in this extravagant stronghold. Except for brute force bought by money and manpower, what's so admirable in it? On the contrary, he was more interested in the structure of the Abyss. In his memory, Malgrin told him that this abyss was like a ship made from fragments of dimensions. Initially, he just nodded ignorantly without knowing the essence of it. Now, seeing it with his eyes that carried over trillions of epochs worth of knowledge, Maximus could see some resemblance. If not pressed for time, Maximus would like to stop and study this abyss realm for a few trillion of epochs. Let's go, Dad. Seeing his father didn't seem to have interest in what he was talking about, Lux was bored. Dragging his father, they came into the Battle Axe Bar. The Battle Axe Bar had become exclusive for top powerhouses. Those weak Tier 8 powerhouses didn't even dare to come close to this bar. After all, inside at least a dozen apex sovereigns were drinking all the time. Seeing Maximus and Lux entering, the powerhouse in the room went sober for a while. Your Majesty Lux, long time no see. How is your business, Mr. Lux? The wealthy boy is here? How about you treat us to some meal? The powerhouses in the bar greeted Lux enthusiastically. As for Maximus, they couldn't remember for a while. After all, compared to the dazzling rich man in front of them, Maximus was really inconspicuous. I'm here to take my father to see Mr. Mag, Lux said. Malgrin's identity was still hidden. Besides a few people, no one knew his real identity. Most of them thought he was an apex sovereign who rose silently from the cursed continent. Your father. Hearing this, they looked at Maximus as if remembering something. Your Majesty Maximus? They greeted with a smile, however, hidden within was a bit of mockery and alienation. Besides a few dazzling feats 1,000 years ago, Maximus was like a shooting star that disappeared after a brief light. However, they were not surprised. This has always been the fate of the Holy Emperor in the past. Besides having a fighting power comparable to an apex sovereign, they were nothing. No chance to reach the apex and achieve immortality. Now, 2 of his sons and his wife even surpass him. It would not be long before Maximus would be buried in history, becoming a mere paragraph in an inconspicuous book. Seeing their look, Maximus was still emotionless. However, as if not wanting to be insulted, his origin became chaotic again. Frowning, he waved his hand. Soon, an enormous pressure descended upon them, crushing their seats as they became planted into the ground. Unlike with his family, Maximus didn't face any suppression from his origin. With enough knowledge, even the power of law could suppress these few weaklings. No one could underestimate the weight of knowledge. Even if it had no direct effect, it is as heavy as a mountain.
Maximus Shadowcrest. Tier 8, 1%.
Affinity. Rank 10, 1118.
Physique, dimensional source rank 10.
Domain. Origin domain. 107, 539 light-year radius. Power of law. 100%. Soul amplitude. 1 quadrillion, 100%. Overload. 109 quintillion. Soul will. 1 quadrillion, 100%. Overload. 12 quintillion. Over the 1,000 years, although there has been almost no progress in his realm, hidden within was invincible power. His affinity, control of the power of law, soul amplitude, and soul will were complete. Just a little push and he could reach tier 9. He was only delayed because he felt an impending disaster if he exited his seclusion. Having no choice, he could only study and study until it broke the limit. Now, if he did his best unless one had perfect control of the essence of law, one would be like an ant standing before a giant. Seeing this, Lux was a little stunned. His father is still his father, still so invincible. Cough. Before he could process his father's invincible power, a slight cough sounded in the room, dissolving the pressure.
Now, let's not destroy my humble shop.
Malgrin said listlessly. Mr. Mag. The drinkers in the room shouted, thankful to Malgrin. While feeling thankful, they couldn't help but blame the wine for making them muddled-headed to talk some nonsense. Maximus may be like a meteor, but his dazzling existence didn't fade but became brighter. Looking at Maximus, there was still a lingering fear within them. We are sorry to offend your Majesty Maximus. Maximus didn't bother about them as he looked at Malgrin. This person was still unfathomable, as in his memories. Even now, he couldn't gauge his strength like a bottomless abyss. Alright, the shop is closed for now. I still have to entertain some guests, Malgrin said, throwing the crowd out of the room. The crowd didn't resist, wanting to get out of there as soon as possible. They swore they would never drink in this shop again. Uncle Malgrin, my father. Lux came to his senses and asked Malgrin for help. Well, it looks like fellow Maximus had been affected by the river of knowledge. Malgrin said with interest.
A river of knowledge?
Maximus muttered, vaguely knowing what Malgrin was talking about. Fortunately, you are as resourceful as always, leaving some backup. Malgrin clicked his tongue in admiration. Can you tell me about it? Ha, no worries, come sit, I'll treat you to a drink. Chapter 363 Classification of Law. After sitting, Malgrin generously poured him a drink. So what is the river of knowledge? Maximus asked directly, after taking a drink. First, let me tell you about the depths of law. First is the power of law mastered at the tier 8 realm, second is the essence of law mastered at the tier 9 realm, and finally the origin of law mastered at the tier 10 realm. What comes next is the river of law, the source of power for all dimensions, whether it's matter, energy, or living beings. The river of knowledge is the source of knowledge flowing through the void, giving everyone enlightenment and intelligence. And from the look of it, you have come quite deep into the river of knowledge and gotten a little lost, Malgrin explained with interest.
I see.
Maximus nodded, feeling his current situation match. Then what about my origin? This should have been left by you. A protective barrier to keep yourself safe even if you're drowning. What a novel concept, Malgrin said in amazement. Malgrin had also come in touch with the river of law, which is the river of power. However, unlike Maximus, who still kept his rationality and originality, Malgrin became like a wild beast, a killing machine who only knew how to kill. It took Malgrin millions of epochs to even get back on his feet and come to his senses. Fortunately, he was already in the abyss at that time, so the Ethereum realm didn't take any damage. So that's it. Maximus nodded unconsciously. Who else could tamper with his memory besides himself? Now there are only two paths for you. Wait for time or look for treasures.
How long?
Maximus asked. As for treasure, Maximus didn't take his chances. His chance of finding a treasure that could help him in his current state was almost negligible. It shouldn't take long, about 1,000,000 years at the latest or a few epochs at the longest, Malgrin said carelessly. It's not that long. Maximus nodded in satisfaction, knowing he could go back to normal in a few epochs at most.
Ha ha ha, cheers.
Malgrin laughed and toasted with Maximus. However, Lux, who was listening from the side, had a dark face.
1,000,000 years? A few epochs?
Heck, even a few years would already be too long. His mother and sister would surely be heartbroken if they got to know his father's condition. Fortunately, they were still in seclusion, oblivious to anything. Thinking of this, Lux gritted his teeth and asked Malgrin for another method.
Another method?
Let's see, you could try using a special physique. But it should be at the ultimate level. Otherwise, it wouldn't work, Malgrin said after a bit of thinking. Hearing this, Lux was speechless. Ultimate level physique? Where could I find that? Not only does it have to be the ultimate physique, but it also needs to be a specific one. There is no way in hell that is easier than finding a treasure that could affect origin. Or you could find a tier 11 individual. They should master some of the river of law. Taking your father out of some shallow water should be no problem. Lux's face became gloomier and gloomier. How is this easier than the others? Just as he was about to despair, he heard a word that made his eyes light up. There is also the daughter of Phelan. A few years ago, I felt a fluctuation of great physique that should be able to cure your father, Malgrin said after thinking. Delving into the river of power, Malgrin was also affected by it. After all, this is a power that only tier 11 individuals can master. A tier 9 weakling daring to take on this power would either die or encounter some problems. A few hundred years ago, when Lilith visited the abyss, Malgrin felt his condition slightly calm down. Unfortunately, it was too insignificant that Malgrin felt it was not worth his time.
Anti-Lilith?
You can just try. I'm not sure. Furthermore, to awaken that kind of physique is not simple. Malgrin shook his head with a sigh. Awakening an ultimate physique is not easy. It's not inborn like other physiques. It needs some kind of trigger to conceive. Remembering the arduous journey he had gone through to awaken his physique, Malgrin couldn't help but sigh. Fortunately, there was a tool buddy, Valoros, who had all kinds of ideas helping him. Remembering his friend, he couldn't help but reminisce. TSK, if that crazy madman was still here, he would surely slice up Maximus into pieces and study. Just what kind of person could still have sanity after dipping into the river of law? Furthermore, to achieve this state in just 1,000 years, just what secret was hiding in his body? Lux didn't care if it was difficult or not, as long as there was a way. Thank you, Uncle Malgrin, Lux said sincerely, giving Malgrin a tier 10 wine. No worries, nephew, we are family. Malgrin smiled widely, taking the wine faster than the speed of light. Although he didn't lack money to buy tier 10 wine, it was still a precious treasure. He couldn't bear to part with it that he only treated Maximus with some tier 9 wine. Then we'll go, Uncle Malgrin, see you later. Come back again, fellow Maximus. Next time it's your turn to treat me to some wine. It would be my pleasure, Maximus said politely. In the Ethereum realm, Arcane Continent, Spirit Domain. Without wasting any time, Lux dragged his father to the Spirit Domain. Looking at the beautiful domain, Lux quickly teleported to his Aunt Freya's castle.
Aunt Freya. Aunt Lilith.
Lux has come to visit. Lux's voice echoed throughout the castle.
Lux?
And the pretty father. Freya quickly teleported in front of them, scrutinizing Maximus. This man had become more and more beautiful. Seeing his deep eyes that could draw anyone in, Freya couldn't help but stare.
What do you want?
Coming to her senses, Freya asked.
About this?
Soon Lux explained the condition of his father, needing Lilith's help.
I see. Freya nodded.
Let me call my sister first. She seemed to be eager to meet this father of yours. Inviting Lux and Maximus into her castle, Freya quickly called her sister out of seclusion. After a while, Lilith came flying to them with excitement.
Maximus.
Lilith lunged forward with tears. This time Maximus learned his lesson. Instead of being passive, he proactively hugged Lilith. Feeling the warmth, Lilith looked up. Maximus? I miss you, Lilith said sincerely. Initially, after their trip to the 3 continents, Lilith imagined that she would become Maximus's wife. She even pondered if she should call him a husband, a dear, a love, a hubby, etc. Unfortunately, before it could become a reality, Maximus had some problems that required him to go into seclusion. With dreams broken, she could only wait and work harder. Fortunately, Lilith had already solved her biggest problem: her limited lifespan. Because of her special condition, she couldn't advance to Tier 9. One of the prerequisites to advance to the Tier 9 realm is to awaken the special physique. This is also where almost all Tier 8 individuals get stuck. To awaken their physique, one needed great fortune unimaginable to many. From origin mana to fragments of world, these rare treasures were too difficult for the majority to obtain. Another alternative was to comprehend the essence of law in advance. However, it was easier said than done. Besides Maximus, who was cheating by spending septillions of points to comprehend the essence of law. For many, they needed millions to billions of epochs of time and heaven-defying comprehension to even have a chance. With lifespans ranging from a few epochs to thousands of epochs, it was nearly impossible for a Tier 8 individual to advance without awakening their physique. Lilith's comprehension is not weak. Now she only needed time, which was already solved by her father. Pheelon just bought her over septillion crystals of life from Maximus. This is equivalent to trillions of epochs of lifespan, enough for her to be a pseudo-immortal. Thus, with hope and belief, she can only pray and wait for Maximus. Feeling his warmth, she felt all the wait was worth it. Meanwhile, Maximus felt his origin being soothed. It was different when he was with his wives and children. Holding Lilith in his arms, his origin became more solid and real. It seemed that Malgren's hunch was right. There was really something unique about this woman. Maximus? Lilith asked, seeing Maximus looking at her deeply. I want you, he said straightforwardly.
Why you want me?
Lilith muttered with a blush.
Yes, he replied, hugging her tighter.
Lilith, Omega.
Lilith was already blanking out, not knowing where to put her hand, much less speak.
All right, enough of that.
Freya muttered, dragging her sister out in Maximus's embrace. She didn't know if she was jealous that her sister was with another man or that Maximus was flirting with another woman in front of her. A sister, Lilith muttered, finally able to breathe. All right, don't be too obsessed. They just need you for something else. Freya rolled her eyes. Her sister was really easy to fool and was too emotional. Just one word from this bastard already made her senseless.
Need me for something?
Lilith asked in puzzlement. Looking at Maximus, she finally noticed something different. Those deep, emotionless eyes, like his soul is out of his body. Filled with worry, Lilith unconsciously clenched her fist. Don't worry, leave it to me. No matter what, I'll help with all I can. Chapter 364 Awakening Potion. In the Moonlight Empire, Maximus Laboratory. Inside, boasted advanced equipment and materials that couldn't be found anywhere else in the world. How is your laboratory, Dad? I supplemented it while you were in seclusion, Lux bragged. Not bad, Maximus muttered, taking in the sight of more equipments and materials than he could remember. At the center was a tower of unknown height that pierced through the sky. If not for the space folding in the room, this tower would have been noticeable in the whole empire. Maximus remembered that it wasn't this tall the last time he saw it. Did you also upgrade the ether tower? Yes, this ether tower is already equivalent to a continental server, Lux replied. As the empire grew and prospered, the initial ether tower was no longer sufficient. With the other 2 continents building a continental server, Lux followed suit and spent money to upgrade the ether tower. Now the Ethereum realm already achieved a seamless connection. Everywhere in the world, as long as one have enough money, one could buy a contact device and interact with anyone in the world. It can be said that the Ethereum realm is in an unprecedented era of interconnection. After exploring the laboratory and inspecting all the equipment, Maximus turned to Lilith.
Are you ready? He asked.
Yes.
Lilith replied, sounding as if she was ready to face death.
Sit first.
Following Maximus' order, Lilith obediently sat down. Opening his domain, Maximus began to study Lilith's hidden physique. However, after a few minutes, he frowned. He couldn't see anything. It was too vague for him to make sense of.
This won't do.
Suddenly, he remembered his system. In his memory, he had directly awakened his physique with the help of the system. It managed to piece together all the physiques that could be awakened in his body and directly formulate the energy frequency needed to awaken them. Silently calling his system, he began scanning Lilith. Scanning. Available physiques. Primordial origin. The beginning of everything, the source of everything. An ultimate dimensional physique that delves into and manipulates the origin of everything.
Primordial origin?
What a name! Maximus thought, shocked by the brief introduction. Although this physique didn't directly add power, it pointed directly to the peak. It was like an auxiliary cheating device that could penetrate the essence of everything. Now, how to awaken this? Maximus had already studied most of Valoro's memories. Among them was the reconfiguration of an awakening potion. This was a Tier 10 potion that could only be created by a Tier 10 alchemist. Thinking of this, he frowned. Although he far surpasses a Tier 9 alchemist, he is in no way close to a Tier 10 alchemist. It seems that I still need to work hard. Awakening potion varies from individual to individual. If it's only a dimensional physique, he just needs to reconfigure a universal awakening potion. As for awakening an ultimate dimensional physique, he needs to reconfigure a specific one. Thus, the memory of Valoro's could only be a reference. How about it, Maximus? I got it. That's great. Lilith smiled widely. Seeing Maximus was still non-reactive, Lilith simply stood up. I'll go to Isabella first, remember to join us for dinner.
Yes.
Although he couldn't feel emotion, he was rational. Staying with Isabella and Lilith could improve his chaotic origin, so why not? The calmer and more solid his origin was, the more knowledge he could comprehend. Thus, even if he already found a solution, he'd like to keep this habit. Seeing Lilith leave, he went back to thinking about how to formulate an awakening potion. Soon after formulating a methodological plan, he called Lux. What is it, Dad? Did you figure out something? Lux asked hopefully. I just needed some time and materials. Don't worry, Dad. Leave the materials to me. Just tell me everything you need. Here is the initial list, Maximus said, giving Lux the list of materials he thought he could use to create the awakening potion. Although he couldn't access the Myriad World Mall, he could still buy any kind of knowledge. Thus he had no problem knowing the names of materials he needed. Meanwhile, Lux held his breath as he rapidly calculated the cost of the materials his father needed. There are millions of materials here. The lowest was at least a Tier 3 ultimate treasure. After a rough calculation, he estimated that he needed at least 100 sextillion to buy all of it. Thinking that a large chunk of his fortune would be spent just like this, Lux couldn't help but feel heartbroken.
What's wrong?
You can't afford it. Maximus frowned. Because he was not sure, he needed to experiment with a lot of materials. Looking at Lux's expression, it seems that the materials he wanted were not so cheap. No, I can afford it. Despite his heartache, Lux still gritted his teeth and didn't complain.
Then you continue.
Tell me if you don't have enough money, Maximus said. According to his memory, the Crystal of Life and the Crystal of Enlightenment produced by his system are in-demand products. Condensing a few hundred sextillion system points should be enough for him to spend. Now, the Ethereum realm worlds is no longer targeting him. He can now condense the energy stolen by his system. According to his memory, after he was targeted by the world, his first thought was to condense the energy stolen by his system to give the worlds a sense of peace. Unfortunately, it was too late. The dimensional laws at that time were already erratic. Leaving a clue as to who stole that missing energy would only result in destruction. Now that all those restrictions are gone, he can go back to business. No, I can still afford these, Dad. Hearing that his father seemed to have a lot of money, instead of shamelessly asking for it, Lux held himself back. Although money is important, he couldn't let go of his pride. After all, his father raised him so well, yet he still couldn't afford anything in times of emergency? Lux would feel really useless if he still asked for money from his father in this time of need.
That's good.
Then call me after you've bought them. Your mother and I will eat dinner, Maximus said. Tisk, yes, just do your thing, Lux clicked his tongue. In his mind, he could only praise his father for being affectionate despite his condition. Gritting his teeth, he bought the items on the list one by one. Soon, a day later, Lux bought all the materials needed. That's good, looking at the materials neatly placed around, Maximus nodded. Tell me if you need more items, Dad, Lux muttered numbly. He had already come to terms with the fact that his money needed to be spent. Anyway, he could just earn it back. It was more important for his father to return to his original self than to worry about money. Waving his hands, Maximus started to look at all the materials around. Spreading his domain, he studied all fragments of information of each material. Maximus began to imprint these information to his conscience, simulating their effect and use. Closing his eyes, he began spending system points like there was no tomorrow. This was another function of life points, accelerating the time of consciousness. Meaning each point was equivalent to him studying the formulation of the awakening potion for a whole day. With over 300 septillion system points in hand, he felt like he had the world. Unfortunately, even with his tempered mind, he could only process about 1 billion epochs of information every day, otherwise, his consciousness would be fried. Soon, in his consciousness, Maximus began to form a space filled with all kinds of apparatus and materials. After a few years of construction, he began to formulate an awakening potion. Millions of materials passed through his hands every year. Different ratios, combinations, methods. After a day with over 1 billion epochs passing through his consciousness, he was not even close to formulating the awakening potion. Day after day, Maximus began testing various formulas, studying for billions of epochs. In his spare time, the time his so-called family dragged him, Maximus would relax and solidify his origin. A few months later, without any result, another so-called son of his exited his seclusion. Max and Ella had to take care of Maxine, so their seclusion lasted only a few weeks to months. With another creditor asking for payment for the time he went missing, Maximus could only stagger his deduction of the awakening potion. From 1 billion epochs a day to a few million epochs a day. Fortunately, Maximus was getting closer and closer to formulating the awakening potion.
Soon, 7 years passed. It's done,
Maximus muttered. After 7 years and over hundreds of billions of epochs, he finally created the awakening potion. Looking at the potion, which looked like it contained the universe, a hint of a smirk could be seen on his face. Getting along with his so-called family generated a bit of emotion inside of him. Although weak, he could still feel a little happiness. Now it's time to awaken Lilith's physique. Chapter 365 I'm here. In the laboratory, Maximus and his family were looking at Lilith. After drinking the awakening potion, the surrounding mana began to surge. The laws in space became chaotic as if they wanted to expel Lilith.
Not good, Maxine yelled in panic.
Don't worry, dear. With us here, there will be no problem. Isabella smiled. The awakening of the ultimate physique was more dangerous than they thought. However, with 7 Apex Sovereign and her husband in the room, there was nothing in this world that could be called dangerous. With Liam, Lux, Amara, Elysienne, Freya, Fialon, and Maximus, it can be said that even if there is a world catastrophe, this place would still be a safe haven. Calming the space and laws, Lilith proceeded to awaken her physique. Soon, a few months passed, and the chaotic energy around calmed down. Lilith slowly opened her eyes, looking at them calmly.
How fascinating,
Fialon muttered, looking at his daughter. Although Lilith was only at tier 8, Fialon felt like he was looking at the world origin. Indeed, what a great specimen. Maximus felt that Lilith had become the truth, the path to transcendence. He felt infinite knowledge of truth flowing from her, which made him addicted. Even with his rationality, he wanted to kidnap Lilith and lock her in a room for himself.
Brat, don't talk nonsense,
Fialon said, forcefully patting Maximus, feeling that he was thinking something crazy. Although he knew that there was something wrong with Maximus, Fialon couldn't have his daughter being thought like that.
I know,
Maximus replied. The most important thing now was to solve his problem. As for the idea of kidnapping Lilith and locking her in a room, it was for later.
How do you feel? Fialon asked Lilith.
I feel great, father, Lilith said excitedly. Lilith seemed to see everything, from their feelings, thoughts, strengths, weaknesses, past, future, everything. She felt omniscient, knowing everything. However, after she calmed down, it was all her imagination because of the leap in strength. She could only see a bit of emotion coming from the Apex Sovereigns in the room, much less their past and future. As for Max and the others, she could barely pry into their thoughts. Their bodies were filled with high-tier treasure, preventing her from seeing further. Don't look too much, your physique is only rank 9. No matter how high the quality is, it's limited, Fialon said, feeling his daughter's thoughts. Lilith muttered, turning her attention to Maximus.
How is it, Maximus?
Can I help now? Don't bother, you being here is plenty enough, Maximus said emotionlessly, In his consciousness, tens of thousands of epochs passed each second. Scanning Lilith's physique, Maximus just needed to copy it. He just needed a reference. He could do everything himself. Then, I'll stay with you as long as you want. Although Lilith knew the meaning of his words, she still blushed.
Let's go.
Lilith said, grabbing Maximus's hand. Awakening her physique, Lilith wanted to celebrate. Meanwhile, seeing her daughter hooking at another man, Fialon couldn't help but have a cold face. I'll go back to the arcane continent first, Fialon said. He couldn't stand seeing his daughter flirting with others like this.
I'll go back too, Freya said.
Seeing her sister safe and sound, she also didn't want to stay here any longer. Maximus just nodded, concentrating on deciphering Lilith's physique. I'll call later after my husband returns to normal, and thank you too, Isabella said. These two were one of the reasons the Moonlight Empire stayed safe without the protection of her husband. After Maximus went into sudden seclusion, the Moonlight Empire was left without an emperor. After a few years, a few decades, nothing happened. However, after 100 years, seeing that Maximus was still in seclusion, the forces outside seemed to smell of fragrant meat. From the guild, the empire, and all their properties, the forces outside couldn't help but tear them up and divide them amongst themselves. Unfortunately, the Moonlight Empire had a deeper foundation than they thought. First is the former apex sovereigns of the Nexus continent. They were like mad dogs that would bite anyone to pieces at the slightest disagreement. Hearing that they were bullying their beloved home, these apex sovereigns nearly started a continental war. If not for the intervention of Fialon, the Ethereum realm may have been plunged into war and chaos. There is also the Shadow Hunter Guild. After Maximus left, with no one to hold them down, the guild nearly disbanded. Top guilds began to poach members with top-tier resources and unimaginable benefits. As long as they betrayed the guild, they could have everything in their dreams. How could they not be tempted? Unfortunately, their little calculation was all for naught. The vice guild leader, Andrew, quickly rectified the situation. Kicking the majority of the guild members, he also increased the benefits of the guild, binding the remaining members more strictly. As for their various properties all around the arcane continent and the abyss, with Lux around, there were not many problems. Everything about business is money and interest, and with the myriad world mall in his hand, Lux had the world. Taking advantage of the situation, Lux even made their business more prosperous. It can be said that even without Maximus, everything went smoothly. 10 years later, after over 1 trillion epochs of comprehension, Maximus finally deciphered Lilith's physique. It's barely enough. Looking at the fragment of physique that was simulated by his domain, Maximus couldn't help but sigh. Even after 1 trillion epochs of comprehension, he could barely simulate Lilith's physique, the primordial origin. Fortunately, he only needed some vision so that he could have some insights around the river of knowledge.
Begin.
Directing the fragment of primordial origin to his chaotic origin, Maximus quickly identified all kinds of problems. Initially, he only saw his origin as a chaotic mass of energy. Now, using the fragment of primordial origin, he saw his origin in pieces like broken glass. Around it was a strong barrier preventing the pieces of origin from being separated and lost in the void. He's so dangerous, Maximus muttered in shock. If these pieces of origin were to break through the protective barrier, he would lose even his rationality. By that time, he would be a monster without a mind of his own, no emotion, no pursuit, nothing. He would become a mere piece of debris flowing through the void for eternity. Fortunately, it's not too late. He heaved a sigh of relief. With the eyes of the primordial origin, Maximus pieced the broken glasses of his origin, one by one. As each piece got glued together, Maximus felt emotion and his missing memories coming back. However, as his origin became complete, he saw the energy corroding him become more intense. Is this the river of knowledge?
He frowned.
Finally seeing the energy manifestation of the river of knowledge, Maximus's eyes darkened. Let's see if I can't cure you. Now that he could see the energy manifestation of the river of knowledge, it was no longer a problem. By now, he had already regained his memory. The origin, cultivation manual, amalgamation of will, the entire system, etc. He could also fully control his origin. Studying the energy frequency of the river of knowledge, Maximus began to create a corresponding barrier. Soon, a few months passed, and the origin barrier he created became more solid. Although the river of knowledge could still pass, it was not as intense. Heaving a sigh of relief, his eyes looked outside longingly. Now that he had regained his emotion, He couldn't help but feel sorry for his wives and children. Leaving for 1,000 years without much notice must be hard for them. Seeing that all pieces of his origin were pieced together, and the river of knowledge couldn't affect him in a short time, Maximus exited his seclusion early. He couldn't wait any longer. He wanted to see them this very second. Opening the door, he saw Isabella and Lilith anxiously waiting outside.
I'm back?
Maximus smiled. Hearing his voice, Isabella and Lilith were stunned. That tone, that emotion, seeing those loving eyes, Isabella and Lilith teared up. Although this decade they could physically interact and see Maximus, they knew something was missing. He was like a piece of moving picture that could only soothe their memory. Hearing his voice, they felt a familiarity with the love and attention Maximus had for them. Don't worry, I'm here. Maximus sighed and firmly hugged them. Feeling his warmth, they cried even further. How hard it must be to see that the man you love didn't even feel anything for you. Although you get along, you know deep inside that he was not paying attention. No matter how tight he holds you, knowing his attention was elsewhere, you will only feel coldness, like it was a dream manifesting before you. As this continued, they could only numb themselves, hoping that everything would work in the future.
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Maximus said repeatedly, proving that they were not hallucinating. They didn't need apologies. They needed his confirmation. Feeling they calmed down, he heaved a sigh of relief. Everything is over now, I'm here.